Hello, children, camera, Cappy. And that's how we're going to bang out the rest of the residual asshole consulting requests. Ones that have already been submitted before the bus or the Cappy went on vacation. So no, I am not coming back. I'm still on vacation. So I'm not a hypocrite. Aaron, I don't understand why countries like Russia and China don't release their own world reserve currency, as Russia has the largest landmass in Asia and China the most people. Perhaps India will come out with their own. Why has the United States still the only choice for the world reserve currency? And why do people still buy our currencies in other countries? Guys, the English, for God's sake, the English. All right, now I've touched on this before, but maybe we haven't talked directly about China and Russia, and then to a relatively lesser extent, India and Brazil. They were called the BRIC countries, and this was a topic of conversation maybe about 10 years ago. And the concept is like, well, the United States keeps manipulating its currency, hyperinflating it, printing it away. That gives me yet another reason. I took notes, but now I just remembered yet another reason why the United States dollar will very likely remain the world's currency. And so people are like, well, the United States has more parasites. Its labor force participation rate is going down. Its people are less efficient. They're making more mistakes. I've talked about that in the IKEA economy. And they're in terminal decline. So why is it anyone would rush to the United States dollar anymore? I mean, and above what was really interesting to me is the housing crisis that led to the global financial crisis was caused in the United States. What did people do? They fled to the dollar for safety. We're the ones that caused it. So I can see there was a little bit of confusion. But let's start with what the whole idea of a world reserve currency is. And the world reserve currency is basically the currency the rest of the world has faith in. They believe it's going to have more value than either their own domestic currency or other currencies that would otherwise flight to. Now, the United States is not the only currency people flight to. So for a while, the yen was. The euro is certainly considered a stable currency. Swiss francs are still, but they're a small country. But why is it not the dominant world reserve currency? Well, let me count the ways, right? First, I've talked about this before, is corruption. All right? And not just corruption within the economy, but corruption within the government, because the government is the one that issues the currency. And when you want to issue the world reserve currency, your government cannot be that corrupt. And whereas the United States government is increasingly corrupt, it is nowhere near as corrupt as any competitors that, let alone individually or as a group, could do that. And you can look up the Corruption Perceptions Index, the CPI, not the Consumer Price Index, but the CPI. And there, like Russia, I'd have to look it up again. I did look it up recently. But the United States is like 38. Russia's like in the hundreds, the low hundreds. And China is 86. You want to be number one because that's the least corrupt. And the goody two-shoes Scandinavians are always at the top because you're just so nice. Oh, look at all the snow and there's no production. Do you make some fish? Wow, that's going to be a dominant global superpower. So they get straight A's. They're just the teacher's pet. Anyway, so when people are looking for safety in a world reserve currency, yeah, they could go to China and buy yuan. They could go to get the ruble. But the problem is they don't know if the government is going to manipulate the currency itself, which all countries do, but to a certain extent. I mean, like fixing exchange rates and things like that. Or foreign exchange controls, capital controls, where you're not allowed to move the money out of your bank accounts. And all four of those countries, but certainly China and Russia, are more corrupt than the United States. Right? So there's a lack of faith that these governments are going to do the right thing. Very closely related, currency manipulation and currency controls. I want to buy Chinese yuan. I want to get Russian rubles. But if the government goes in and manipulates the currency, and all governments do this through their central banking operations, but where it's like, no, we have a fixed exchange rate. No, we're going to put in price controls. And that's the main thing. China has done that. They have manipulated their currency to keep it artificially low so they can keep exporting stuff. And if your currency is not allowed to rise, well, then people would look at it like, well, why would I buy in your currency if you're not going to let it float relatively freely among other exchange? I'm trying to get out of my crappy currency, so I maintain my purchasing. I took my time, I translated it into my crappy currency. I want to now maintain the life I've put into this currency and get it into a more reliable one. But the Chinese are messing with their currency. So I don't know it. Just so you know, everyone does it. The Swiss did it too. Oh, the good old Swiss. I bought francs during a financial crisis, so the build up to it. Everything was great. Then they started doing, not capital controls, but they started printing off money and lowering their interest rate, and then the franc didn't. I'm like, God darn it, you guys. So there's that. Also related to corruption. Is the government going to F with their currency? And those countries all countries do it, but they're going to F with their currency more than the United States is, if you can believe it. Also related. Talking of effing with the currency. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, did you see how much Biden bucks we printed off? Which we've been printing off money since George Bush Jr., by the way, and borrowing debts and all this other stuff. And you could say, yeah, okay, the United States is doing that. But then when you look at the rest of all the other competing or potential world reserve currencies, they print off more. They borrow more. Now, Russia in this regard, not so much, but certainly China. And if you want, you could look at their private debt too, not just government debt, but they got other structural financial issues, which we won't delve into. But, the saying is the smartest kid on the short bus, or the best looking horse, or the last horse in the glue factory, or the hottest fat chick at a party of fat chicks. Yes, the United States is still a fat chick, but she's the hottest one in the party. Because every other country is that much worse. We print off 5% more money, the Europeans print off 7%. We print off 10% more money, the Chinese print off 20%. Right? So relative to other countries, it's like, well, the United States is just botching its currency, but not as badly as everybody else. So that's another one thing. Then there's what I like to call the reservoir of production. Currency has no value unless there's actual production behind it. Ask Venezuela, ask Zimbabwe. See how that works. What do you mean we just can't print off more money? And smaller countries that actually have good finances, like the Scandinavians and the Swiss, they have great budgets, great finances. No debts, very little. Well, why wouldn't that make a good currency? Well, if the Swiss were to print off and become the world's currency, they'd have to print off trillions of Swiss francs. And at some point in time, those Swiss francs, you'd say, okay, once you lose your world reserve currency, the only place you can buy stuff is in Switzerland with Swiss francs. You can't go to South Africa or Vietnam with Swiss francs. You'd be like, what's this? Now, sometimes they do that, but that's called dollarization. We will get into that later. And if all of a sudden, I know the Swiss economy isn't even $1 trillion. They don't produce $1 trillion worth of stuff. I think it's only like 350 billion. It's a small country. If also trillions were to flood back into the Swiss economy because the world no longer wants its world reserve currency, or there's so many Swiss francs out there that foreigners now can take those Swiss francs and buy all the property in Switzerland, well, you sacrifice your sovereignty, you put it at risk, and you subject yourself for potential bout of hyperinflation, if in any other reason your asset prices. So that's certainly something that happens there too. So you need a reservoir of production that kind of matches the world's reserve currency, or the demand for the world's reserve currency. And the United States is, I still think, a third of global production. We are by far the biggest economy. Now, China they're coming along, India too. Europe as a currency unit or cartel, they're kind of there too. But the United States we just got the world's largest economy. So if you have a dollar, there is, at least within the United States boundaries, enough production to give it some intrinsic or tangible value. I understand a dollar being paper or digital is not intrinsic, but just roll with me on that. So in order for people to say, oh, that dollar has value, ultimately it's like, well, if I have this dollar, what can I get with it? Well, you can go to the United States to get something. Oh, what do they make in the United States? Pretty much everything. All right, yay. So there's that. And finally, the military. Another thing is we have the world's reserve currency because fuck you. That's why we got the world's largest military. If you don't like it, so China, on fundamentals, you'd like to have China's production, Scandinavian budgetary austerity and finances, and Russian economic growth. That would make a great world reserve currency, and maybe the Chinese and Russian military combined. We don't even come close to the United States military. So in a very dark and unethical way, it's like, you're going to take our US dollars, otherwise, hey, nice town you got there. Hey, nice carrier fleet you just built. Be ashamed if something happened to that. And I don't think we overtly do that as much. It's not like we're the mafia just yet. But if someone comes up to us and says, we'd like to get paid back our trillions, like the Saudis, they got trillions of dollars held in U.S. government bonds. Like, we'd like to be paid back. Like, oh, would you like to be protected more? Oh, would you? That's very interesting. Shut the fuck up. In other words, to quote Chris Beckloff, fuck you, that's why. And that's it. So there we go. I got to make these short because the video quality is pretty high. It takes a long time to upload. We'll see you guys later. Toodles.